So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at a very simple shape and some of the things that we have to consider when we're doing a rhinestone design. And we're going to show you a variety of plugins for CorelDRAW. Um, and CorelDRAW is my tool of choice, go-to tool of choice when it comes to rhinestone design, just because of the editing tools that CorelDRAW offers. And I'll show this in more detail here momentarily. But so to begin with, what we really need is a vector object. And most Rhinestone programs have some type of way or another to get a vector object. Now, because of the tools in CorelDRAW, this very basic shape is pretty easy to create. So rather than using some type of automated function to convert these black lines into a vector object, I'm just going to go ahead and do it manually. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the three-point curve tool here in CorelDRAW, and it's really simple. You just click and drag from point to point, and then the third point is the curve itself. So that now you've defined the curve. And then on this end here, it's more or less a straight line. So again, click, drag, define, quote unquote, the curve. Same thing over here at the top. Click and drag from point to point, define the curve. And then lastly, from point to point, and define the curve. Now that's not an exact spot-on replication. I mean, you could come in here and then fine-tune this node editing. You can see right here it's off a little bit, but I think you kind of get the idea. You use these control handles to really manipulate it, so it was perfectly spot on, but it's pretty darn close, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll make a small adjustment there. And again, like I said, we could come in here and just drag this line up. Get a pretty good representation of the original. Most of the time when you're doing rhinestone design, it doesn't have to be exactly spot on perfect. So now that we have a vector object, now we're able to size it. Nice that we have dimensions here to go by. So we're going to do 7 inches wide, and you can see it's roughly about what the original was, 1.5, and we have 1.478. So close enough for government work. Now, what we're wanting to do is take a look at some different plugins and how different rhinestone programs would fill this object. And just for simplicity's sake, we got to pick a stone size, one or the other, and for this example we're just going to use a basic 10SS stone. So the first thing that we need to do is let's go ahead and export this design, because in some of our other programs we're going to need that vector file as well. So let's just go ahead and call it curve. And I already have one called that, so we'll override that. Alright, so here we are in CorelDRAW. What can we do in CorelDRAW? Well, first of all, we could show you a couple of basic things. This is going to be kind of a lengthy video, but if you really want to sit and study different rhinestone programs, these are some of the different things you have to consider. So first things first, let's draw out a circle, and I'm going to change this circle to 3.3 millimeters. I want to just show you the CorelDRAW way, because if you understand the CorelDRAW way, you'll have a better understanding of rhinestone software in general. So let's go ahead and give these two circles. These are 3.3 millimeter circles, which is what I use for my 10SS stones. And then we're going to come into our blend docker, and we'll just give it the standard 20 blend option. Okay. Now, there's a variety of ways we can handle this. One way we could do this, and maybe what we'll do is we'll make a duplicate of this. So one way to do this is, let's say we want, the first thing that we want to do is, again, what we're ultimately after is a fill. But I want to explain something, because these different rhinestone macros and programs, they do something pretty special that you wouldn't find in, say, Adobe Illustrator or CorelDRAW itself without a little manipulation. So let me show you an example. So, real simple example, let's say I just want to do an outline. You're going to find, when I started in rhinestone design back in January 2012, I was looking for a rhinestone program, and one of the things that was asked of me is, well, do you have an example of something that I wanted to fill? And as I looked at all the rhinestone designs that I had already done, the vast majority of them, I'd say 80% of them, was all about outlines. It wasn't even about fills. But it's really the fills is what ultimately most of us are interested in, because outlines are pretty basic, pretty easy to do. But let me show you something here. So we have a blend here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use CorelDRAW to attach this blend to this outline, and we'll choose blend along the full path, and you can see now all my 20 little stones have been scattered throughout this whole path. And if I increase that to say 90 stones and hit apply, now you can see we get a much fuller path, but it's ugly, right? And look at this corner. Isn't that an ugly corner? That's not something that we would want. And if you look over here, that's ugly too. If I go to wireframe mode here in CorelDRAW, we could see that those corners are ugly. That's not how we would want to typically place our stones. So we bring in, let's say we bring in our R-stone macro here. So in R-stones, we can simplify the process. See, now it wasn't a complicated process in CorelDRAW, just using CorelDRAW itself. And for those who maybe are just starting out, honestly, for me, I wouldn't use anything but CorelDRAW, but for lots of reasons. In fact, we have a video on showing like how we created a volleyball heart and used the volleyball heart for a vinyl shirt application, and then used the exact same artwork for a rhinestone application. If I was using some other proprietary rhinestone software, I could do the rhinestone part, but I wouldn't necessarily be able to repurpose that artwork in that program for doing a heat press application. So for me, because I do a lot of both, I also do a lot of embroidery. So when I create artwork, I'm creating it with the idea in mind that I might use it for heat press, I might use it for rhinestones, and I might use it for embroidery. So that's, and my embroidery software and everything all works inside CorelDRAW. So that's why I'm a big CorelDRAW nut. But let's look at the R-stone macro. That's a great little macro for 50 bucks. Now it doesn't do a lot of the things that I personally would like it to do. But what it does do well for $50. So we saw the CorelDRAW way, right? It's a little bit of a manual process. We do have to understand how blends work, and it's pretty simple though. So then we bring in R-stones and say, okay, well, we can pick we'll do an SS12, right? So we get the right size hole. And this is just a matter of preference that I like to use. There's actually a function up here where we can produce a stencil and decide the exact hole size we want. But anyhow, that's for another video. Alright, so we want to apply stones to this outline. Well, there's a function here in R-stones that says control points. Okay, so now all I have to do, it's telling me I want to fix the intersections and I want a stone at the start and end point and blah blah blah, but real simple. And I just click this button, boom, and it thinks about it, and then it does it. And that's it. Now look at how much nicer these corners are compared to what we did over here. See, much better. So because we use these options. Now we don't have a stone here in between at the end cap, and the reason for that is obviously if we were to create a stone and place it there manually, you would see why we don't have it. It's because we specified a certain spacing between stones, and there isn't enough space there to have a stone and maintain that spacing. Okay, so that you can see this is a much cleaner effort on the part of R-stones. Now there is an advantage, however, over on the CorelDRAW side, and this to me is what makes or break rhinestone software, in my opinion. And in my opinion, over here on the CorelDRAW side, if I grab my node edit tool here in CorelDRAW, because we applied the blend to this line, to this path, I can actually take this path and stretch it like so, and look at what happens. See, to me, that's an amazing feature, is the stones follow the path. So, and oftentimes when I'm doing rhinestone design, I'm making adjustments, and I only wished that some of these other programs, I mean, this to me is a fundamental capability that we just gotta have. So if I want to make all kinds of manipulations, look at those stones, just flow with the path. And if I make this path huge, right, and the bigger I make my path, look at that, the wider the stone spacing gets, but that's okay. Because now that I have my new path, I could just come over here to my blend docker in CorelDRAW and say, all right, well, 90 stones ain't cutting the mustard now, so let's bump it up to 120, and now you can see my spacing is nice and tight again, right? Or I can back it off to say 100 stones and hit apply. That's one of the Achilles heel of CorelDRAW in the blend function, is because we don't really know how many stones are going to fit. We know after we've done enough rhinestone design whether that spacing right there is too much or too little, and it's too much typically. So we have to play with this number to get it right. So let's say 110 stones, and then we hit apply and say, okay, yeah, now we're getting the spacing between stones better, and we have to fiddle. Whereas like with our stones, we can just tell it, you know, put the stones on this line, and it does all those calculations for me. But the difference is with our stones, while it gives us a really good result for the most part, they're individual stones. See, they're not attached to the path. And that drives me bananas, because I need those stones attached to the path. So if I modify the path, then you know, the stones will follow the path. So we'll push our stones out of the way, and we'll take a look at another macro. And this macro is a little bit cheaper, only 35 bucks, and like our stones, is a great macro. It does have some fill capabilities, but I just want to kind of cover the outline capabilities right now. And so again, all we have to do is select a stone size here. Now I have to confess, I hardly ever use this macro, so bear with me a little bit. So at any rate, so I specify my stone size. Let's go up to an SS12 here, which is that 3.2 millimeter size, exactly the same size it was over on the R stone side. But again, there is right here. See this function right here? I'll allow sharp corners. Okay, when I hit apply, watch what happens. So now we have our stones applied, and just like our stones, see, nice sharp corners, right? Same thing, gives us the exact same result as we got with our stones. And of course, that's the exact same result that we should get. And the reason we should get that is because we use the same size stone, we use the same size spacing between stones, so we should get the exact same result. And just like with our stones, these are loose, which is a downfall if you ask me. And just like with our stones, if we were to make that extra stone in there, you can see we have the minimal spacing just like we did in the R stone version. So it did a very good job, very, very quick, certainly easier than doing it manually in CorelDRAW. But again, we do have that extra special advantage where if we modify the path in CorelDRAW, then so for example, let's go back to this. So this is a perfect example of where this path modification comes into play. So let's say we're kind of back to square one here, right? So when we modify the path, see, there's not enough room here at the end. Let's go into wireframe mode. See, there's not enough room here at the end to fit that extra stone, right? So what I would probably do in a situation like that, depending on exactly what I'm doing, is I can come in here and edit this path, maybe, if I can get all the, there it is. See, so I could fine tune, and I could just stretch this out until there was enough room in there to fit. See, so I can make that small modification until there was enough room. Now, obviously, let me just minimize draw stone here for a minute. I need to go back in and lower my stone count back to 90 here, because we have way too many stones now. But I can modify this width and the stones will automatically modify it with me. Now you may be asking yourself, well, if I'm going to do the CorelDRAW version, okay, how would I fix this issue where the stones aren't at the corner? Well, what these macros do for us, these macros are kind of smart. What they do basically is right here at every node, I'm just selecting the node and choosing break apart, selecting the node, choosing break apart, and then finally selecting the node and choosing break apart. Okay. Now, I'll go ahead and choose break apart one more time. So now what we really have, we have the same shape, but you can see now we actually have 4 separate pieces, right? So what I can do here is I could apply fit blend to path. So I just copied one to another, and you can see now that is fit to that path, but obviously I've got 90 stones just on that one path. So let's break that back down to about 40 and just see where it gets us. That's pretty close. And I'm just gonna, let me back that up. I need to copy this path, and all I'm going to do is right click and drag onto that and choose fit blend to path. See, so I just copied that down. So now I have 40 stones at the top, 40 stones at the bottom, and then I could copy this again, and again I would right click and drag to this end, fit blend to path. Now obviously there's way too many stones there, right? So let's back that down to 5. That's too many. Let's try 3. There we go. So that takes care of that end. And now you can see that we basically, let's go back to our enhanced mode here. Now you can see what I was talking about. We have basically the same exact result that we had with our stones. So let's go ahead and come over here, and we'll copy here. That's what I needed to do. And then I'm going to click and drag and try to get right on there. I want to grab this blend here and attach it to this end. There we go, fit blend, and then obviously we've got, let's go ahead and hit apply. Alright, so because I was able to modify the path, I was able to have enough room in here where I could have the spacing between the stones the way I wanted it, but still have the path, the stones attached to the path. Okay, so just like before, now if I want to modify the path, I can, and the stones go with it. I have nice sharp corners, just like with R stones and draw stones. I have nice sharp corners, but now I'm able to modify each one of these segments of the path individually, and the stones move with the path. And to me, that's important to have that functionality. So that kind of shows you how the outlines work from that perspective. Now, let's take a look at fills for a moment. So, Drawstone, in fact, pretty much all Rhinestone programs pretty much work the same way. You know, we have a defined circle size, we have a defined container. How do you fit it in there, right? So, in Drawstone, there's this function called auto matching fill, and I have no idea what kind of result we're going to get, so let's just click on the button and see what happens. You know, there's angles that we can give it, and all kinds of things. There's all kinds of different options here, but let's just try a basic auto matching fill. The one drawback is sometimes it takes Drawstone a little bit of time to produce. Now you can see that's obviously not a result but keep this result in mind for a moment, okay? So keep that result in mind. So obviously that's probably not a result that we're going to like too well. Well, what if we gave it an angle? So we'll give it an angle. We'll try a 45-degree angle, see if we get any different result that way. Now that's better, right? That's better than what it was. Still probably not exactly what we would probably want. So it's better, but not great. And so then there's another option, which is this matrix fill. And we could try that, and that too also has an angle option. So let's just try a basic matrix fill. Okay, and now that looks pretty similar to the auto matching fill, but slightly different. And Matrix fill, think of matrix fill as a grid fill. So all the stones are going to line up one above the other, right? So let's go back to the other fill and look at that so you can see the difference. We'll go ahead and apply that. Now this time we still have that angle in there, so let's just remove the angle so we can see that difference. So we'll go ahead and delete that, go back to no angle, and we'll click apply one more time. Alright, so the difference here, if you remember the other result, it's from what I call the grid, they call the matrix. These stones are not lined up in a grid. They're not right on top of one another. Okay, so it's slightly different. So the reality of it is, at the end of the day, neither of these two options, the auto matching or the matrix fill, really is going to fill that shape in completely the way we would want it to. That's the long and short of it. Okay, so let's move on and let's take a look at our stone example. So in our stones, they have a grid option too. So if I go ahead and click on that button, you'll see what it does. And you can see that their grid option is very, very similar to the Drawstone version. Okay. Again, for this particular shape, probably not something that we would use, but you can see that the stones are stacked right on top of one another as if they were in a grid format. So we'll go ahead and delete that and take a look at some of the other fill options. So we have grid with horizontal shift, grid with vertical shift. We have a middle line with fill, and then we have this island fill. So let's try the island fill option. See what we get. Now that's better. That's a more similar result that I had in my mind when I first looked at the shape. Now there's what I would consider fairly extensive editing. You can see that we have a pretty good sized gap here that obviously we probably wouldn't want. We have lots of overlapping stones here, which that has to be dealt with too, and lots of overlapping stones here. So while it's a better looking, it's more similar to the idea that I had in mind of what kind of fill I would want for the shape. Clearly there's still work to be done. It gets us part of the way there, and the reality of it is this is an interesting shape. It's a very common shape. It's these types of odd shapes are something that we come across every day in rhinestone design, and the fact of the matter is that they're not easily handled. Now there's some ideas that I have rolling around in my head of how I would handle this, but we should go to the next step. Okay, so the next step, alright, so we've pretty much exhausted the CorelDRAW way. Now let me back up one thing. Because people might say, well, if I were just going to use CorelDRAW? Now you can go to eBay and pick up an old copy of CorelDRAW for $50. Okay, so obviously I love CorelDRAW, and I really think it's the tool to use. But let's do this. Let's do a 3-millimeter offset to the inside using this contour function in CorelDRAW, and then do it one more time. So we'll go ahead and we have to break the contour that we just did. We have to break it apart and then do it again. And so now you can see, and this is basically what our stones does. So okay, so we have these blends down here, and what we're going to do is take an existing blend, and we're just going to do just like we did before. We're going to choose fit blend. Okay, so now you can see that we fitted that blend, and let's go, remember we were at 90 or so. And do you see the similar result that we're getting? So let's go ahead and copy that here. I need to break. So then what we had is this little piece right here, right? So then all I'm going to do is grab that blend, fit blend to path, and we're going to lower that down to about, let's try 20. That's why I don't like about CorelDRAW, because really it's just a guess. But just like in the R-stone version, let's try 30 stones, you can see that we have a lot of overlapping stones at the end here, and we have all these overlapping stones, and just like in R-stones, we have this gap. Okay, so that's essentially what R-stones did, but it did it in an automated fashion rather than us, you know, copying this blend to every single piece. Let's see. Oh shoot. See, sometimes it's hard to grab just the blend part. So let's try it one more time. Nope, doesn't want to let us do it. But at any rate, it's neither here nor there. You can see the similar result, and that's basically what R-stones is doing. It's just doing it in an automated fashion. So from that perspective, R-stones is definitely a nice tool to have because it definitely simplifies the process of applying stones and doing what they call an island fill. So back over here, now this software is called Drawings Professional. This is the latest version, version 6. I've been using Drawings forever and a day. It works directly with CorelDRAW in that it allows me to take my vector artwork that I did in CorelDRAW, bring it right into Drawings. I can convert it to embroidery. I can convert it to rhinestones very, very simply. So let me just show you a basic example here. So what we're going to do is we're going to say I need to create a new artwork from a file, and on my desktop I have that curve that I exported from CorelDRAW, right? And let's see here. I have to remember. Let me see here. I don't think, now that I think about it, I think I have to export this maybe as a, not an EPS, but maybe a CMX file. Drawings is sometimes kind of weird. There's some things I like about it, things I don't like about it, and EPS import's one of them. So we'll just use the CMX format. Gets the job done. So there is our curve, right? And under the view menu here, I'm not going to do 3D preview because it crashes my computer for some reason. And then we're not going to look at the hoop. That's distracting. Alright, so here is that same curve object in Drawings. And the way this works is because we don't have a fill property specified, we cannot click on the fill bucket. Okay, so we only have an outline. So when I click on crystals, it allows me to apply crystals. You can see how quickly and easily it did that, right? You can see it used the SS10 because it's what I used last. But look at what the artistic crystals you can purchase. I should point that out. I'm using Drawings Professional 6. Okay, this is a full-featured embroidery software, rhinestone software, all in one. But they do have a product called Artistic Crystals, which is just has very, very limited embroidery functions and all of the rhinestone functions. And the rhinestone functions are fairly limited as well. But at any rate, you could see the difference in CorelDRAW, in R-stones, Drawstones. The corners are perfect, which is nice that it does that for us automatically. And with this software, look at that. Look at that. So this is what excited me about this software. Now maybe nobody else is excited about this, but trust me, to me, that's a very, very big deal. Being able to grab this, what they call edit shape nodes, I can select that path just like I did in CorelDRAW. And watch this stone over here in this corner. You can see it as I move this path. So I can manipulate this in a variety of ways. Those corners always stay nice and sharp. But unlike CorelDRAW, it automatically adds and subtracts stones at will. See? So as I modify my path, it just adds stones as needed. So to me, that's a powerful, powerful feature that you just don't get with R stones and draw stones. And in CorelDRAW, I had to break, in order to get these sharp points, I had to break each line in its own segment. Where here in Artistic Crystals, I saved that time. So you might be wondering, well, how much is Artistic Crystals? Well, the short answer is I don't really know. But I think it's going to be about $300. I think if you go on the internet, you can search it out, and I think you can find it for about 300 bucks. So, is it good for outlines? It's very good for outlines because it's pretty simple to do, and it does the basic things that we would want. You could see these little square nodes. Those are basically what R stones refers to them as control points. And so anyhow, really excited about the fact that in this software we can manipulate our path and the stones just flow right along, either adding or subtracting stones as necessary. So definitely a step ahead of CorelDRAW, definitely ahead a step of R stones and draw stones in my opinion. Obviously a lot more money, you know, because we're talking about 300 bucks here, compared to $50 and $35 for those two macros. And of course you have to have CorelDRAW too. But at any rate, that's how that outline feature works. Okay, so we're going to go back to no outline. So then let's take a look at fill. Well, in order to add a fill, what we have to do is we have to bring up our fill palette, and we have to actually, in order to fill this with crystals, we have to give it a fill color. So let's do that. So now we have a fill color. Now our fill tab becomes active, and we can do a crystal fill. Now, isn't this interesting? This result is very, very similar, if you remember, to the draw stone auto matching fill. See, the stones are not lined up right on top of one another. So it's not like the grid fill of R stones or the matrix fill here in draw stone. But the end result is somewhat similar, right? So we do have other fill options, however, and these things are kind of neat is because we can control the spacing between lines and the angles, and I mean we can do all kinds of interesting things with these little control nodes. You know, how useful that is in the real world, I don't know. Still doesn't give us the result that ultimately we would be looking to get for this shape, in my opinion. So let's take a look at the other options that we have. And one option is called circular. And it's an interesting option because I've never really seen it in other Rhinestone programs. I don't know that, I don't know how useful it is. But I do think it's kind of interesting that it's a different type of fill. It creates a circular motion. Like I said, I don't know how useful it is, but you can see what it basically does is it creates this circular motion between. So I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how interesting that really is. I've never really had a use for it yet. But what about the contour? Now, contour, you can see, is somewhat similar to what we had again with R stones. You can see that it handled it a little bit differently, but still you can see it didn't do a great result. And you know, there's some options here that we could try. We could try turning on the offset option here. And sometimes when you're playing with these options, you can force it to give a little bit better result. You can do a negative offset where we can come inside the original outline, and then we can kind of force it into a more similar result that we got with. But I do want to point something out here that is kind of special about this. If we remember with R stones at this corner here, we had a lot of overlapping stones, right? And then back over here, we had a lot of overlapping stones as well. Well, Artistic Crystals is a little bit smarter in that because it knew that we had overlapping stones, it just deleted those overlapping and just gave us a single line. There's not enough room there for two. So in that respect, Artistic Crystals did give us a slightly better result. but still a fair bit of work to do nonetheless. And then the other ones, shape fit, it's just not something that is useful for this, and nor is line fit. So really the only usable fill option here in Artistic Crystals would be the contour fill, and it doesn't even get the job done. There's still a fair bit of editing to do with that. So still not exactly what we want, but it is a decent program. For 300 bucks, it's decent. It's just, I don't know. The fact of the matter is, it's hard to do with Rhinestone software to get even a very simple shape like this to get the real results that we want to get. So then we have to go take a look at our next piece of Rhinestone software to see how it might handle the situation. So this is the Oobling software. And let's open up the curve. It'll at least import an EPS without throwing us fits. So that's kind of nice. So with Oobling, it's pretty easy software to use. We have our basic shape here. If I click on the little heart for our rhinestones up here, we have outline options and fill options. Let's take a look at the outline options first. So we'll choose select elements. We've already defined the spacing between stones, and that's what this option right here does. So we'll choose select elements. We're going to use an SS10. This is the one thing I don't like about Oobling, is it doesn't allow us in an easy way to say, hey, this is the size hole I want. In my opinion, other people might disagree with that, but I don't know. It just says SS10. I have no idea what size hole it's really even representing at this point, and that bugs me. I should just be able to tell it, hey, this is the size hole I want to use, and I want to call it an SS10 hole, and I should just be able to do it, and I can't. But at any rate, let's go ahead and hit OK. And you can see how easy the result is, right? It's a great result. Nice sharp corners. It does that for us all automatically too. But what it doesn't do, these stones are not attached to the path. And as you've already seen in Artistic Crystals, in CorelDRAW, when we're doing it manually in CorelDRAW, we're able to modify the path, and the stones follow with the path. And for the way I like to design, to me, that's a big feature. That is a real big feature. And to not have that feature bugs me. If I need to modify this path, I would have to delete the stones, and then I would have to restone it. Or the other option is to manually manipulate the stones as necessary, which it probably wouldn't be that desirable either. So at any rate, but you can see to do the outline, it's pretty simple. Now this is a lot more money. Don't quote me on the exact price, but I believe it's somewhere in the $600 range. So it's a lot more money than Artistic Crystals is. So for that extra amount of money, we want to make sure we've got double the benefit, right? If it's double the cost. So let's take a look at the fill options here. So here in the fill options, again, we can specify the edge-to-edge spacing of the stones, and this is the outline offset if we wanted it. So just like before, we have this grid option. Let's go ahead and try that. So, we got to select elements. That's what I need to do. We'll add some SS10s here. So you can see that's the grid option. Very, very similar result to draw stones and R stone, right? And Artistic Crystals for that matter. The stones are stacked right on top of one another, just like in R stones, and the matrix fill in draw stone. So nothing really special there. Again, not a type of fill we would use for this particular object anyhow. So we can look at a spiral option here. Let's see here. Let's take a look at the centerline spiral. Sometimes you get different, results depending on, and so now you can see the result that you get with that. It's, it's a bit of a, I don't know, doesn't really look like something that we would use. And then we could choose the random. That is kind of random, so that's probably not what we want to use. And then we can choose center, and yeah, that's not staggered grid. And yeah, so probably seems to me I want to be able to use the spiral, but let's see what's happening here. It doesn't seem to give me a result that I want, so I'm not sure why. Like I said, I'm definitely not an expert at this program. Obviously, you can tell that, but the reality is the fill. You know, in order to just click a button to get the result that we want, um, it's not going to happen. At least not in this program. So. That's what we looked at. You know, we've really covered the gamut and the different programs that are out there that are available. There's one program that I wish I could demonstrate for you that I can't, although I did have an opportunity to look at it. It's called Hotfix Era, and actually I think it would actually handle the fill the best out of every piece of Rhinestone software I've looked at. It definitely handles the fills the best. You know, I don't know if it's necessarily for me. I don't know if it handled it $500 better, and that's kind of what I was judging everything on. So yeah, I don't really know what the answer really is, the ultimate answer. If we go back to this result that we had with CorelDRAW, I'm going to select everything. I have another macro that I think would actually handle this pretty well. It's a very manual process. Well, I shouldn't say very manual. It's a manual process, but it actually does a pretty good job. And basically, what it entails is simply selecting two objects, and then it will automatically calculate. Get rid of this one and this one. What it does basically is automatically calculate how many objects would fit in between, and then it fits them in between. So what I would do, I added 40 stones to the bottom line, I added 40 stones to the top line, and then I would come in here and I'd have to do this all the way down. But in the end, I think because we have an even number of stones at the top and the bottom, I actually think it would do a decent job of filling in the area. Now, as we get down here, though, what we would find is that you know, here we start out with quite a few stones, and now you can already see because of the smaller area, we can't fit as many stones in it, and so you know it's not going to give us, and now it just keeps going down and down and down, and I don't know if I like that any better than any of the other fills that we got. You know, doing it any of the other methods, that maybe this would yield us the best looking fill without doing a whole lot of manual manipulation. So we would just come in here. There's a total of 40 stones at the top, 40 stones at the bottom. So we'd have to do this 40 times, which there's no simpler way that I know of to do this. So we'll just go ahead and do it and see what it looks like. But of all the other fills that we saw, when we do it quote unquote, you know, completely in an automated fashion, so now as we get down here, the stones do get a little bit closer together. But now you can see, because of the spacing involved, it can only fit one stone in between. And I don't know if I like that necessarily. What we could do is we could, you know, at this at this top here, we could switch it up to a more manual process. But of all the ones that we did, and again, this is really a matter of personal preference. Of all the ones that we did, that probably looks the most uniform out of all of them, in my opinion. Now, like I was saying, what we could do here is we could come in here and we could manipulate. We could squeeze in. Maybe some of these we could, even though the spacing gets a little bit tighter, we could maybe squeeze those in a little bit. It just depends on what we're looking to do. And when it gets really tight, then we could bring in a different size stone. We could stagger, maybe do some type of staggering here at the end so we don't have quite as much white space area. We could do something like that. So just a small tweak there. We do have a little bit of a gap here, but it's a give and take with the fills a little bit. So there is our finished result that I think, out of all the other ones, to me, that I like the best out of all of them. But again, it's really probably a matter of personal choice. And in some of these here where the gap is pretty wide, we could go with a tighter spacing and probably sneak in an extra stone or two. But at some point we wouldn't be able to do that. So anyhow, that's just some food for thought. Gives you an idea of how some of these different programs handle the situation, and then you can decide what you like and what you don't like from there. Thanks for watching.